Hello, hello, hello. Thank you guys for tuning in to another episode of Outside the Box. It's me, Sage the coach. And again, I will say that I'm not called a coach because I coach sports of any kind, but because I am a certified life and relationship coach. And so, with my podcast, Outside the Box, what I like to do is give people a wider perspective of God because God is bigger than our boxes. And today, I want to bring that wider perspective to a very serious topics of gangs and Christianity. I know those two things don't necessarily seem to go together, but that's what we're going to dive into today. One of the reasons why I wanted to address this topic is because I grew up in the hood, so to speak, and my brother, who is also a guest with us tonight, John, we have had these conversations a lot. Like, we have grown up, we have seen people get killed being in gangs, we have seen the progress of selling drugs, end up in jail and things like that. And now we're much older and we can look back and reflect on it even in a totally different way. And so we've had conversations about this before, and I thought it was really important that some of the things that we talk about are kind of brought to the forefront because there are really serious issues, especially in the Black community. But instead of just having a conversation between a brother and a sister, I also wanted to bring Christoph on, who has a more professional opinion of, especially of dealing with youth when it comes to this issue, because of his what did you call your group? I mean, the I know it's called 3M, but how would you categorize it? Like, to explain, actually, Christoph, can you go ahead and explain to people what your group is and what you guys do there?
Absolutely. So, Mission 3 is a nonprofit organization. It's a character and leadership development solution for organizations, communities, aimed with enlightening, engaging, and empowering our young adults, our young people, to elevate in school life and career. We take them through a very rigorous programming, whether they're in middle school, high school, or college. We take them over an 18-week boot camp, and we really dive in to figure out who these people are. We help them find themselves, help them find purpose, give them a life plan, and give them just a guide and some direction, ultimately to live the rest of their lives in freedom, fulfillment, and significance.
Okay, wow, that's great. That's really good. And I think that's really a necessity, especially in the Black community, because you have a lot of young men growing up without their fathers, and they really, really need a positive male role model in their lives, which I'm sure we'll go into a little bit more today. And John, which I've just told you guys, is actually my big brother. And so, John, if you want to go ahead and introduce yourself, and tell people what you're about and what you do.
You talking about my career and stuff, or
Well, just tell whatever you want people to know.
well,
If you,
I'm
whatever.
I'm a father too. I've been a machinist for 25 years. My early years in life, we was raised in church. Those was the good years. Then it was a period of time where I got in trouble, the gangs and stuff like that. And about age of 18, 19, or 20, I tried to break that spirit, and it was a lot harder than I thought. It took some years, but I made the leap.
Okay. All right. So I think that is a good segue into kind of like the first question that I wanted to ask. And Christoph, you can kind of answer the question yourself if you don't have a lot of your own personal experience with this. You can just answer the question based on what you have seen other young men going through, because I'm sure you have different types of young boys coming through your program. But John, can you explain a little bit about how old were you when you got in the gang? What kind of things you experienced in the gang, and at what point did you decide to get out of it?
Well, our early childhood, we was raised in church. When we got out of church and parents divorced, I vividly remember when my dad was out of the house. It felt like a lot of the demonic spirits in the street started kind of coming into our house. Like before, I didn't realize it till later, but it was like when I had my father around, it was like a hedge around us. A lot of stuff we was kind of like shielded from. I didn't worry about peer pressure and gangs and stuff like that. As soon as my dad left, I vividly start remembering that pool, because a lot of people just get in gangs to for protection. A lot of them not hardened criminals. A lot of it just for protection. So from the age of about 11 or 12, I joined the gang. It was mostly out of rebellion. I was upset that my father was gone. I was mad at what was happening to our family. So that was my way of trying to get attention, but didn't realize I was getting on a roller coaster. I mean, it just take you in all sorts of directions you don't want to go. So I went from this soft church boy to being a criminal, basically.
Mm.
And seen a lot of bad stuff. So about the age of 18, 19 years old, because being a gang is never like really my name. I'm not like no hardcore person that can hurt people and stuff like that. So about the age of 18, 19, I had a lot of questions, and if God is a good God, why did God allow certain things to happen to our family, and why did this good person over here get killed? I just had a lot of questions, so I started reading a lot of books, watching tons of documentaries. It was like 7, 8 years, and at the end of the turning point was I'd already read the Bible. I had to read the Bible several times, but this time around reading the Bible, something really stood out to me, and I knew it was the answer I was looking for. It was in the book of Romans when Paul talked about the power of sin, how sin deceives you, how it trips you up, how it enslaves you. And I had never really looked at sin like that before. So when it made me read the Bible with a new set of eyes. And when I started looking back on the past and a lot of decisions I made, it was because I was deceived and I was under the power of sin.
Mm-hmm.
I had been deceived by a lot of the rap music I was listening to, and that was ultimately why I made a lot of bad choices.
Mm. So what made you, so you're talking about like reading the Bible at 18, 19 years old. So, and the question that you had, so at what point did you actively start to like, this is not what I want to do, and start to chart a different course? Like, what was that thought process like, or what was it about?
I just remember, I was like crazy about rappers like Tupac. I mean, everything he said was like gospel to me, because I kind of looked at the rap music for my answers. And they was giving their interpretation why the world the way it is and why your life is. And rap got like this kind of predictive power where it's telling you where you're gonna go, why you're gonna go there, what you can expect. So I believe the rap music, and I started reading about politicians and inventors, and I started really being impressed by them and the contribution that they made and the type of life that they lived and the recognition they got. And I started kind of looking up to people like that. And that kind of like was the transformation.
Okay. And so Christoph, like I said, I know right before this, we were talking about if you had any personal experience, and you said that you were kind of offered to sell drugs at a young age. Can you talk a little bit about that and how that took you down a different path, and kind of like what do you see with young boys as far as like why do they get entangled in gangs themselves?
Absolutely. I mean, anytime you're dealing with someone who is pre-adolescent or in that adolescent stage and their mind is in that developmental process, and three very key things I want to make sure that the listeners tonight get out of what John just talked about, that I got, that was just super impactful and deeper than what even he probably thinks of himself. But number one is you really have to be careful what and who you're listening to. He talked about the music and listening to, Tupac and rappers and what they rapped about and what they talked about. My second point is you can't be what you don't see, or what you hear. And he said something that was just golden. He said, I looked up to them. And you got to be careful who you look up to. And the people we look up to, we often see ourselves as, and we set that as our bar and our expectation in life, because we truly believe within ourselves that we can become these people. So you have to be so careful. And as a parent, whenever you have young kids in that pre-adolescent or adolescent stage, you really have to take responsibility and do your due diligence in making sure you're paying attention to who they're listening to, what they're listening to, you may not know what the music is, or, like you talked about earlier, you came from a Christian household who went to church. They might not have known what Tupac was saying. You just listening to rap. As a parent, you really have to take ownership and listen to the words of this music, because music is really influencing what our young people today do, what they think is acceptable, what they think is okay. If you look at the way that men treat women, we treat women by what we hear on the radio every single day. We think that's acceptable. Women act just like what you see on television and in the media. We think that's acceptable. We set that as our bar. So you really have to be careful as a parent, because you can't put all the responsibility on a young person. They don't know any better. That's what we're here for. What keeps me up at night, Sage, is that young people, especially, even adults, we don't know what we don't know. So we need someone who does know to let us know those things. So the circle you keep is so crucial and so important. Another thing as a parent we have to do is we have to construct and create an environment, even outside of our home, that we can place our children in to make sure that they're safe and they're getting the love and the direction and the guidance necessary. This is especially true when you're dealing with someone who comes from a single parent household. Someone who comes from a single parent household is they're significantly less successful in life. They typically don't graduate high school. They probably won't go to college. They probably will create single household families. I mean, all the statistics are there. So as a single parent, you have to know these numbers. You have to know these things, and it is very difficult. But I want to say something that a lot of people might not like, and it's that great parents oftentimes don't raise great children on their own. What raises great children is great communities. And what I mean by communities is it could be the community in which you live. It could be your neighborhood. It could be the school system that you send your kids to. We've got to be honest with ourselves. We don't, as parents, raise our kids every second of every day. Most of the time, if you're working, your children are at a daycare or in school for most of the hours of the day. So you're entrusting strangers or other people to raise your kids. You have to know what they're saying and what they're allowing to happen. So that's hard to do, but we have to take that ownership and responsibility. The last point it just hit the nail on the head when John was talking about, he was asking questions. He was asking, some of the questions he was asking was, how can a loving God allow this to happen? The thing is, as a child, even more so as a child, but even in adulthood, we all have questions that we ask. You have to be super careful with who's answering those questions. That is the key. We all have questions, but you have to be wary of who is answering those questions. And a gang member, if you've got somebody who wants you to join their gang and they're the ones answering those questions, any question answered in confidence, most typically people will believe. And as a kid, you're going to believe anything someone says if they say it in confidence. So again, that's why you have to be really, really careful on what type of environment your kids is in, what you're allowing them to listen to, and you have to be nosy. You've got to be nosy with your kids. Nobody wants to be that, but you have to be, because the world around us is evil, corrupt. There's sin in the world, and you have to put on your armor, and you have to make sure that your children that you're raising have their armor on every day, and that armor really is you.
Yeah. And like you were saying, the stuff that he said is like, really stuff you wanted to kind of expound upon, which I was hoping to kind of go into later, and you just kind of no, it's fine. It's fine.
He said something important, but go ahead, Stephanie.
Yeah, you just went in a little bit deeper, and I'm sure, like, because those things we need to dive into those, and that's what I want to kind of talk about today, as we get more into this interview. But I wanted to kind of start off with people knowing the perception that you guys would be speaking from. So John is speaking from a perspective of somebody who was actually in a gang, who kind of went through those things. And then Christoph, you were speaking from a perspective of somebody who, was an offer was made, and how did you avoid that? And then how you kind of use some of the things that you've learned over the years to, create the organization that you've created. And so I think that those are really important things for people to see also, because like you just said, you can't be what you don't see. And sometimes people need exposure to these different points of views and opinions so that they can now sit back and ask those critical questions that you're asking of themselves in their lives and even in their parenting, because all of these things are really important. and we're going to dive into them a little bit more, I'm sure. But did you have anything you wanted to add about your own personal experience, or do you want to
Sure.
just go ahead to the next question?
Well, sure. I'll backtrack to that. He just had though. I didn't want to forget
Yeah, yeah,
what I
yeah, yeah,
heard
yeah,
you
yeah.
saying, but I actually had a really good friend of mine in high school ask me. He solicited for me to join a gang that he was in, and I was very shocked that he even asked. And to be very honest with you, he was talking about the money that could be made, and as a kid, that all sounds great. They talk about you being protected and the familial aspect of it, and being a part of something. They're really good salesmen. The people they use to kind of recruit people, right? They sell you the dream. They sell you that you're going to be a part of something that's kind of bigger than yourself, or whatever they think that hot button is for you that you're missing out on. And they typically prey on the weak. And he approached me about it because I was somewhat of a loner in high school. And I said no, like I just no. And after that point, I really didn't hang out with him as much as I used to, because that just totally changed my perspective of him. But after that occurred, it really occurred to me. Even before that, I've always had a passion to help people. But after that happened, I said, you know what? If a friend of mine, I couldn't have guessed that he would have been the one to ask me something like that. If he can get caught up in something like that, and he was from a 2-parent household, I can only imagine what's happening to these kids who are in a 1-parent household that may be a little weaker minded and more easily influenced by other people. I have to do something. That was the thought process in my mind. So I really began at that point. I want to say that was the 11th grade, really observing people, if you will, and studying people. I wanted to become a master of people, to be able to notice signs early on of someone who may just be getting into a gang, or someone who could potentially be a victim or future recruit for someone, because they may be a little easily influenced peer pressure wise. So I just begin to notice those things, take note of it, and get really good at identifying people who may be at risk for doing those sorts of things.
Yeah. Wow. So I will add to you guys' experience that I was also in a gang for a very, very brief amount of time. And one of the reasons that I got in the gang was for protection. And so on my social media platforms, I always kind of post a question for the topic that we're going to be doing today. And I asked people, what do they think is some of the reasons that people are attracted to being in a gang? And protection was one of those things. And that's actually why I got into a gang, because I was in the neighborhood. Like I said, I grew up in the hood, and there were girls always trying to fight me and my friends. And as you get older, fights become more deadly. It's not, just a tussling on the ground. People bring weapons and things like that. And so for my own protection, I did end up joining a gang, but luckily my gang life didn't extend very far, because a few months after that, I ended up moving to another state. So I had that very brief experience of being in a gang, and I did join for protection, and I did feel protected. Like, there was one time where some girls kind of came up to my school to fight me. And when I let it be known what gang I was in, so we're catching the bus outside, and so there's hundreds of kids out there.
Mm-hmm.
And so for the most part, it's just me and my friend. And here comes this big group of girls. And when I let it be known what gang I was a part of, like almost half of that group was like now had my back, because I was associated in that gang. And they probably really prevented me from getting seriously hurt, because such a large amount of people kind of had my back, to the extent that it deterred the girls from actually trying to fight me. And so I do understand, and I kind of wanted to share a bit of my experience about some of the reasons that people get involved in this. It's very easy to look at it from a distance and think that anybody who wants to be involved in a gang is automatically a bad kid, or wayward or whatever. But there are some very legitimate reasons that people get lured into that. Like even what John was saying, he kind of was upset about our dad leaving and things like that. There's a lot of stuff, and it kind of hints to what you were saying, Christoph, that it usually starts in the home. So whatever's going on in the home or not going on in the home, it's definitely kind of puts your children at a higher risk of being lured into or attracted to that lifestyle, because sometimes people just get into it for the brotherhood, so to speak, or the community, like you were mentioning before. And so 1 second, I have my questions here, so I want to make sure I don't get too far off track. And so as far as like, what you were saying, John, about you you talk about reading and stuff like that, and how it started to change your thinking. How did Christianity play into that? Was it totally separate from you being a Christian? Like, you went through this process first and then Christianity came later, or was Christianity a part of that process?
Okay.
If you want to touch on something that Christoph said,
Christoph said something very, very important I want to highlight, because it definitely was it helped me a lot. So I was a kid, church boy, smart, math contests, beta clubs, and all that, till being completely brainwashed and ignorant about rap music. I didn't know left from right. By the time I was 18, my mind was so closed, and I had no direction or anything. So around that age, I was sick of my ignorance, and I just had the urge to read. And we was raised in church, so that was one of the books I first started reading. But I didn't initially believe I was studying the Bible. So I was looking for, I was basically reading any book that would give me answers, whether it's philosophy, psychology, economics, anything that explains people's behavior and why we do the things we do. But something that Christoph said is very important when you talk about who you surround yourself with. I think one of the major blessings that happened to me was when I became 18 and 19, I started working. And in that environment, I was around a lot of men. And now I have somebody I can measure myself against. I could see their lifestyle. They was foreigners. They were Spanish people. They was Polish people. They was Russian. They started inviting me to their homes. I started seeing their family. I seen how close-knit the Mexican was. They had homes, and I couldn't believe it. So that being around men and thinking I was finding answers, and I say something and I would get rebuked, and they'd tell me that ain't how life worked. I had somebody that correct me all the time. Then I started being more careful what I said around them, because I said, wait, I can't look like a dummy in front of them. I want to get to where they at. Yeah. So I was reading a lot of books, but the Bible at that point, I believed in the God, but I really at that point did not believe all the stories in the Bible. Put it that way. That came later, a few years later. Mm-hmm. But okay. Christoph said something very, very, very important. It's that community who you with. As a matter of fact, when I was in the gang and selling drugs, we had a couple big shops in our neighborhood. They had a Camaro. They had trucks, and they had nice leather Pelly jackets and the gold chains and stuff like that. And you want that. You idolize that. You want that. But once I started getting the drugs, I kind of got into it accidentally, but right away I started meeting like really big drug dealers. And something that completely blew my mind was I started meeting white big drug dealers, and they had huge homes. They had 5 or 6 cars. And now I'm looking at them and comparing it to my friend. I'm like, this is ignorance. That's actually what made me didn't want to sell drugs no more, because I'm risking my freedom, my life, and I could clearly see what they have. I'm never going to get what they have. Mm-hmm. I mean, they not going to let me get that big. That was actually the turning point where I didn't want to sell drugs anymore.
Mm-hmm. Wow. So you were saying like that the turning point was you seeing that what you thought was big actually was small.
It was nothing.
Yeah.
You perspective changes everything.
For a jacket. And these people have huge, and they're not gonna get caught. They have businesses, they launder their money, and they're not gonna get caught. You never see them across the television with handcuffs on, because they protected. And it just for us to think that we can do that is not going to happen.
Wow. Wow. So did you still want to kind of answer the question in terms of like how Christianity, I mean, I know you said you weren't really believing the stories in the Bible, but you were looking for the Bible for answers, but so Christianity didn't really have a role in your decision to change your lifestyle? No.
Oh yeah, it had a huge decision. Like I said, at that moment, I had felt something. I felt the spirit of God. I felt convicted for my sins. I knew something was missing. I knew I was a sinner. I had that instinct. I knew that, but reading other books, you can read anything, psychology, philosophy. It can explain things about why people behave and do the things they do. But the Bible had the more definite answer to me when it talked about the power of sin. That to me, that undergirded everything else. Yeah, you can explain this with economics, you can understand this with psychology, but you if you don't understand the power of sin, and the way Paul explains it, when you are deceived, you are controlled by sin. So it was some things I did that was very shocking, that I thought that I would never even do growing up, that I did because the devil deceived me. I was controlled by the power of sin. So that was the huge, at that moment, that's when I consider myself, when I became a Christian fundamentalist. I stopped doubting everything in the Bible, and I just believe every word of it. I stopped questioning it. If the Bible say this, I'm going with it. I don't care what scientists say. I don't care. They digging in the earth and measuring it. I'm going with the Bible.
Yeah, and so Christoph, I know you talked about you, because to me, and I'm not sure what environment you grew up in, but you seem to be at a young age even able to discern that being in the gang was not the way you wanted to go. So how did you figure that out at that age, that that's not what you wanted to do so quickly?
John just keep hitting on. I get happy over here because you're saying so many deep and wonderful things, and I hope people are really taking notes of all this stuff. Perspective changes everything.
Yeah.
If I gave you my glasses, what you saw would either be blurry or it would get better, right? It's going to change. So whenever you put on a new lens, things always change. And the lens that I came up with, I also grew up in the church, but we didn't grow up, well off or rich. So I was in some bad neighborhoods where I saw things and heard things, and I knew with my lens, when I looked around, I didn't want any part of that. I wanted something different. Like I wanted what the white kids had,
right?
The two parents and mom is dropping them off in the nice car, and they had nicer clothes. Like I wanted those things. So whatever they were doing, that's what I wanted to do.
Right.
Whatever the kids in my neighborhood was doing, I knew that was the example of what not to do. So I tried to always do the opposite and just always kind of stick to myself. And again, going back to what John said, what I kind of expounded on earlier is, all of us have questions. Who is answering your questions? You have to keep that in your mind. Who are you allowing to answer your questions? That is what is going to determine what perspective or what lens you look at life through. So I knew I did not want those things. I wanted better, not only for myself, but I also wanted better for those that looked like me and those around me. So my life growing up was more so about how can I equip myself and prepare myself to be a leader. It's almost like I wanted to be a modern day Moses leading my people out of poverty. And not just poverty when you think of terms of money, but, happiness poverty, family poverty, spiritual poverty, all those types of things. How can I lead my people to something greater, to abundance, to prosperity in whatever form that, it works for you? Another term I kind of just wrote down here that we were talking about before. John, you said something about, you got around those people and you wanted those things, but then when you saw something else, then you wanted that, right? There's a term in, I think, like sociology called herd behavior, HERD. And simply what that means is people react and do things based on what people around them are doing, whether or not they have a better moral base or sense, or they want to do it or not. We typically do what those around us do. That's just who we are. Monkey see, monkey do. So when you know that and you understand the power of that, as long as you commit to hanging around people who are doing things the right way, then you will probably do things the right way no matter how hard it is. If you look at the disciples in the Bible, there's a reason Jesus chose 12. There's a lot of reasons. But Jesus just didn't pick one disciple and say, I'm going to work with you for 6 months, and then you go out and I'm going to get one more. He said, I want you two to come together as a family, as brothers. My mother is now your mother. We're all one right now. So you have to think of your life in that sense. If whether you believe in Christ or you don't, there's still power in the group. There's still power in the circle. And that power is greater than any one power could ever be.
Yeah.
Because as I rise and as I bring those behind me up, all the people that they're connected to, whether they want to rise or not, they're going to move up a little bit. If I elevate, I want to make sure everyone else around me is elevating. So if we truly understand the power of the people that we surround ourselves with, the power of our mind. I read something earlier today that said, pressure is a privilege. And when you think about that for a minute, pressure is a privilege. What does that really mean? Well, greatness, happiness, wealth, none of that can truly be found on a beach. It can't be found in a place of laziness or complacency. Pressure is a privilege because whenever you aspire to become the best version of yourself, which is where true happiness, peace, and comfort, fulfillment, significance, purpose, all those things are found, it's pressure because you're fighting against this and this, and these and these, right? You're fighting against the physical to get something that's only attained in the spiritual, something it's not tangible. You can't touch it,
right?
Feel it. I can't give you happiness. It's something that happens on the inside of you. That's what young people are looking for. John was looking for, and you were looking for, I heard you say, to be safe and protected. You can't touch protection. You're looking and searching for something that you can't feel. You just know it's there. John was searching for, a greater sense of self, for protection, because his dad wasn't in the home. He was hangry. He wanted to be a part of something else. Maybe he wanted some male role models, those sorts of things. Those are some things you can't touch or take with you. So if we're all searching for things that aren't tangible, the battle truly isn't on the outside world, it's within.
Exactly. And I mean, a lot of this kind of goes back to what you were mentioning before. Like you were saying, the power of the community and power of, things like that. You also mentioned the power of the mind. And all of this really goes back to the mind and how, and even the Bible kind of hints at this in more ways than one. But it says that faith come by hearing. Hearing is your mind. Like whatever you become exposed to and whatever you digest and whatever you see and whatever you are around, you are automatically going to embody those things in one way or internalize those things in one way or another. So even hearing the word can widen your idea of God, or being in a neighborhood where you're seeing a lot of gang activity will make you more gravitate towards gangs. And then it also is connected to our needs. Like a lot of the time we think of needs when it comes to the physical, like our touch, taste, and we need to eat, we need shelter and things like that. But your mind also craves to understand, and your spirit also craves to be loved and to have purpose and things like that. So when a lot of these things are not met within our fallen existence, because they're not, and then you have the added pressures of single parent homes and poverty and things like that, it just really makes the lure of street gangs and being in the gangs more appealing to you, because it seems like it can give you something that you need. And so I think that's really important for parents to understand, because like you were saying, Christoph, the only barrier between you and that world out there is your parent. Like if your parent is not guiding you in a different direction or protecting you or teaching you something different, it's going to be really impossible with that herd mentality for you not to just follow what you are seeing. And so parenting is really a key factor that I really wanted to touch on a lot tonight when it comes to this, because a lot of the choices and a lot of these young men that get caught up in gangs, it could be reduced a lot if you have parents pay a little bit more attention, which I know is difficult, especially if you're in a single parent home, especially if you're poor and things like that. Like you say, be nosy. You have to pay attention to what is going on with your kids. Like you have to. It's more work. It's exhausting, but you have to, because you can save their life. Like you can save them from getting into something that will possibly lead to their death or land them in jail. And then once you go to jail, it's a whole different story, that a lot of those people can never really get their lives back together again. And so that all of those things are really, really key. And we have to not only protect our children's minds, but we have to also protect our own minds, because your mind will absorb whatever you're around. So I just want to throw that in there. I know, John, you want to say
Yeah.
something. Go ahead.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
So something interesting that happened to me is when I was on my search, I got exposed to being around a lot of foreigners, and I was smart enough to learn Spanish, so now I could communicate with people. And I learned a little Polish, and they started asking me questions like, why black people like this, and why black men do this, and why they don't work, and why they abandon their babies and all this. So I had to explain to them that a lot of the black people that you see, and I had this thinking too. You don't think you're going to live long. You don't think you can hold down a job and buy a house. You don't think you can learn a career. You think you're going to die young. So, and they were shocked to hear stuff like this. I said, yeah, most black, you don't think you're going to live long anyway.
Yeah, because that's what you're seeing around you. Yeah.
I said, that is really in, I said, so when you see that these young kids, they don't care, they can kill like that. I said, a lot of them don't think they ain't got nothing to lose anyway. See, I understand that because I had the mentality. I thought I was going to be dead at 25 years old. I never thought I could be a father, hold a job, and have a career and provide them. I'm just amazed at that because for so many years, I didn't think I can do it. So talking to foreigners and they asking me questions about the black people, and I had to really start thinking like, hey, you don't understand. I'm not making excuses for them, but you have to understand that
it's not that simple.
Right. That stuff have a hold on their mind, and it is hard to break.
Yeah. And I think that goes a lot with what you're doing with your program, Christoph, because you're actually giving some young men who maybe don't have exposure beyond their immediate circumstances, giving them a different type of exposure so that they can think differently, so that they can see what other options and possibilities they have. I know for me, I left the area that we grew up in at about 15 years old, and I went to a totally different community where we grew up was predominantly black. And so where I went, it was the first time I was in a predominantly white area. And so from there, that was the first time I heard anybody ever talk about college. I didn't ever think that I could go to college myself.
Right.
And then so it was like one thing to hear people talking about it, but then it was another thing to think, oh, you mean I can do that too? Like it just never crossed my mind. And so it's really important that we, even with kids and everything like that, that we expand our exposure beyond like our immediate immediate environment. Because especially if what we're around is bad and negative, it's going to be very difficult. Like what you were saying, Christoph, to go against the grain if all of what you're seeing is negative. And so you need somebody to kind of reach beyond that and pull you out into like a different realm of seeing life, so to speak, if that makes any sense. Yeah,
absolutely. It's all about, not teaching kids how to or what to think. Rather, it's how to think critically. And the most powerful thing that we possess, other than life itself, is our minds and our thinking power and the ability to have free will and the ability to change, the ability to walk down one path for, however many years or months or days or whatever that entails, and to be able to make a split decision, in one night and completely transform your whole life and your path and your direction. Which is what John did, which is what you did. You make an internal decision to just be different. And the other point that I want to hit on, which is so key, you were talking about parenting before. We talk about the responsibilities of parents. And John said something earlier, and I caught it. I forgot to mention this earlier. But he said, he started hanging around other black men who, were doing well, and they would give him constructive criticism or feedback. He felt like he couldn't say or do things that he might have felt comfortable doing in another group of crowd. So he was almost, let's go back to peer pressure. There's negative peer pressure and positive peer pressure. That group of men was giving him the positive peer pressure he needed to be a better version of himself, to be the John he ultimately wanted to be. Because if it wasn't who he wanted to be, he probably never would have hung around him again. Yeah. So there's a reason, you kind of keep going back to that. So, somewhere along the lines, you have to make a cut between either one group or the other. Who do you really want to be? And you've got to make that decision for you. But also, I want to challenge the body of Christ. I want to challenge just anyone listening here. You may have children, you may not. I think we all, as adults, and as good stewards, not only of the world, but of each other, as brothers and sisters, we have a responsibility for one another. And most importantly, and more specifically, we have a responsibility for all of our young adults. In church, in the community, in the school system, we have a responsibility. A lot of these kids, they aren't getting what they need at home. So we have a responsibility together. Call it a gang if you want to. We need to be a gang of positive influence and transformation, helping kids, learn how to think for themselves, how to think critically, how to get the life they actually want out of this world. Because life is short. It's longer than we give it credit for, but it's also very short. So we have to make sure we're giving our young people everything they need in order to be successful.
Yeah, I think that's important to address because, like, even John was saying, like, the difference between like he was talking to foreigners and their view of like what Black people are going through here. I just want to touch on that because a lot of times street gangs and things like that are associated with Black people, especially in America, although we all know that that's not only Black people that are in street gangs.
Oh yeah.
But it can definitely it is definitely a problem within Black communities because of poverty, in my opinion. So when you have so many Black people, because we have been kind of denied the right to accumulate wealth over so many generations, you do have a little bit more Black people living in poverty than we should be. And, and so it has in some ways become a culture. And so when you have these environments where people are kind of living in poverty and then they see these things, like if you're living in poverty, drug dealing looks appealing to you. Like you said, you see the guys with the nice cars and you see the guys with the jewelry and the nice coats and things like that. And so then you start gravitating towards that way. And so we need to kind of address like some of the issues within the Black community, because it's easy for people to look from the outside and think that something is just wrong with Black people. But these is normal type of things that can happen when you are surrounded by poverty, when you have a lot of negative influences. This, like you said, the herd immunity thinking, even the single parent home dynamic in the Black community, which is very, very high. You don't have a father there, like John talked about earlier, to kind of take you down a different path or show you a different example. You become more vulnerable to the influences outside of the house. Like a lot of these things play into some of the statistics that Black people end up falling into because of kind of their environment. And again, I don't want to be like John and say that people are not responsible for their own choices, because they are. But you also have to look at the larger factors that contribute to such a large amount of people kind of making the same kinds of choices. And so for Black people, we need to address these things. When you're growing, when you are in a single parent home, in my opinion, you need to make a better effort to really keep an eye on your kids and make sure that they're not hanging out in the streets, and that you do put them in programs like Christoph is running, and that you maybe keep them in sports and things like that, so that they are not left to the neighborhood or whatever people are doing outside. And if you're outside of the Black community, that you don't just look inside and say, well, something is just wrong with those people because they can't get it together, but understand that there are very real factors that play into, very human factors that play into why this is an issue within the Black community. So I know I kind of mixed a lot of different points in there, but I was just trying to hit everything because, we're going to run out of time very soon. And so, John, did you want to say anything else? It looks like you have something to say.
Oh, yeah. Some of the examples you're talking about, the one scripture keep popping up in my head that Paul said, sin deceived me and it slew me. I looked at that. I wanted it. The devil deceived me. Go after it. And they pay a big price for it. I paid a big price for it. Sin deceived me and it slew me. The devil tricked me. When you talk about the spiritual aspect of it, but I made the choice. I seen the devil showed me something that I wanted. He tempted me. He lured me. He didn't show me all of it. He showed me the bright part of the nice side of it. But then then show me the cliff that was on the other side. So
Exactly.
a lot of young people, when they look at the videos and the musicians and all that, you know, they see the glamour and they don't know the ugly dark side of all that stuff.
Yeah. So can you talk a little bit, John, about some of the things that you kind of got into? Because I know you talked about, because I want to give people a clearer picture, that because like this type of stuff is familiar to us, but to some people this is like a foreign, language, and they're like a gang. And like, so what kind of ways, like you say you went from like a church boy to like, how bad did it get for you? Like, what kind of stuff did you really get into? Like some of the things that you said you thought you would never do.
Oh, selling drugs, shooting, doing drugs, experiment with drugs, robbing people. I never ever in my wildest dreams thought I'd do something like that. And just for the devil got this trap where he put people in situations they feel like they don't have another option.
Exactly.
Rather it's selling drugs or robbing a store or getting the board, the devil make you think it's no way out and you actually have an option. But the devil set you up in situations like that, and you feel like I got to do this, and you really don't. I was when as I got older and I started looking back, and like I said, I've never been a hardened person. I said I can't believe what made me do something like that. I can't believe I did that. And go back to what Paul said: sin deceived me and it threw me. When you what I got from the book of Romans when Paul talk about sin is that once you step on that ride, you are not in control anymore. You're gonna obey sin. You can just get on and get right back off. You don't know what the devil gonna let you back off. He might let you back off right in your grave or into prison or in a hospital bed, be paralyzed or something like that. So when I'm in church now and I see these young boys, I can see what's coming to them a mile away because I know the thinking, I know what they're looking at, I know the lies that the devil are telling them because I was in the same boat.
Yeah. And so, I mean, a good point that you brought out, and I kind of want to touch on too, and I won't talk too long, is that all of these things are like an escalation. Like they're not, and Christoph, you kind of mentioned this too. They don't happen within a bubble. They're all connected to other things. So if you have a kid that gets involved in gangs, or you end up becoming involved in gang as an adult or whatever, it usually stems from your home life, your environment, what you're around, what you're influenced by. It's like one choice kind of leads to another choice, and then once you get involved in that kind of gang environment, it doesn't just stay there. It leads to another choice, to another choice, to another choice, to another choice, and before you know it, the consequences are here, and this is unavoidable. And so it's really important for us to, and I'm a life coach, and I mentioned that earlier. It's really important for us to take charge of our choices and understand that they do lead to other things. In the same way that one bad choice can lead to another bad choice, to another bad choice, one good choice can lead to another good choice, to another good choice, to another good choice, because even your decision to do something differently led to now, being, you wanted to read, and then that led to you learning more, and then that led to you being in a different environment, and that led to you wanting. And so a lot of times we just need to make a different choice for today and let that choice take us to the next best choice for tomorrow. And I think that goes for teenagers and grown-ups alike, even when it comes to parenting. And so that's another really important thing that I think should be highlighted also.
One of the subject during my reading that I have a fondness for is statistics. I love reading stats, criminal stats, murder stats, because to me it goes into, this is like, numbers don't lie. If 500-600 people get killed in Chicago every year, most likely it's gonna happen a year after that and year after that. Now, when you Brother Crystal talked about how when a father's out of the home, what categories that the children fall into automatically. Probably don't graduate high school. They probably get a criminal record just from the father being gone. A lot of one important stat that I found really compelling is for people that's hanging out in the street, they young. If you in Chicago, most people that get killed in Chicago, you got innocent people, little kids, but the vast majority of them are convicted felons. So if I'm a convicted felon and I'm out there and I'm out of prison, I'm out on the streets, guess what? The chance of me getting killed is higher. So to me, that's why I really love stats, because it's like a slice of the truth. You can see the probability
of something. Yeah.
If you go this way, this is the probability that it's going to happen to you.
Yeah. Yeah. Christoph, did you have anything you wanted to add to what me or John said?
Just so much great stuff. I mean, it really is. I think I'm getting more out of this than maybe some of the listeners are, just being involved in the discussion. You know, one of the scary things that the enemy uses against us is a syndrome called the "it won't happen to me" syndrome. And so many of us fall victim to it, right? We see other people doing these things while all the time it's like the enemy, you know, both of you guys alluded to it. It's almost like he's getting you addicted to a drug. What makes us weak, and the weapon that the enemy uses, is a little thing called emotions. And what happens is he'll give you just a little taste of something and you may not get caught, or it may be fun and exciting and thrilling. And because you didn't get caught and there was no consequence, you do it again. And every time you do it, the need to do it again becomes more and more. And this is just like a drug addict. It's the same type of philosophy. Even with sin, it's the same thing. You get addicted to sin.
Oh, yeah.
And, you know, John said something so critically true and important for people to write down and to acknowledge and to pray about. And it's that thought that I don't have any other option. I'm stuck. When you get to that point, the devil's like, I got him.
Oh, yeah.
I finally got him, right? Because that is when he really has your mind blinded by what's actually possible for you. Right. Because you can change any minute of any day.
Yeah.
You are what you repeatedly do. As long as you don't repeat it, that's not you. Okay? And I'll say that again. You are what you repeatedly do. As long as you don't repeat it, it ain't you. So you've got to define who you are by what you allow yourself to do daily. That's why what you do daily matters. If you say you're a Christian and you're not in the Word daily, or fellowshipping with people daily, or trying to fulfill what the Word says about the way you're supposed to live daily, then you're saying one thing and doing another. It doesn't make sense. And then another thing you said a long time ago in the discussion, you know, faith comes by hearing, right? So John was talking about what he was hearing from other people. Hearing just isn't with this. It's also what you're reading. What are other people saying about what you want to know? So, you know, again, it goes back to the point, I'll say it again, who are you listening to? Who is answering your questions? So emotions, don't allow the "it won't happen to me" syndrome to happen to you. Because there's so many of us watching this right now, so many of us just at home right this moment, watching Netflix or listening to a rap song saying, that could never be me. And when you say that, it's music to the enemy's ears. He's going to start giving you small little doses of something. He knows what your hot button is, and he's going to do everything in his power to get you hooked and to get you in that place of I don't have any other option. He's waiting for you to fall in that pit right now as we speak. So unless you surround yourself with people who can help you see, because there's going to be times in your life where you just don't know what to do, and you're going to accept whatever the first person you run to says. And if you don't have a good, solid circle of influence, then what that person says to you can be life or death. The Bible says that there's life and death in the tongue, right? That means what someone speaks to you has life and death potential. And unless you surround yourself with people who can give you life, you're running yourself down a path of what will feel like a path of no return.
Yeah. I want to step away from a little bit of like the spiritual component of it and talk a little bit about, I guess, more in tangible or medical or scientific terms, because everything that we're saying is connected to the mind. And so and you can't really dispute that information. Like, you may have some people watching this that don't believe in God, or anything, or are maybe not that very spiritual, but it still goes back to the mind. So just like what you said, Christoph, whatever you repeat is who you are. This repetition is how the mind is wired to repeat things. And so when you learn something and your mind repeats it, it becomes ingrained in your thinking. And it takes for you to make a different choice and repeat that action to change that thinking. That is not easy. And so a lot of people struggle with that. And this, when the Bible talks about renewing your mind a little bit, this is what it's talking about. It's talking about basically rewiring your brain, because you've gotten in the habit of, you've seen all this stuff. Now you're in the habit of doing all this stuff. And now you are getting the consequences from doing this stuff. And you need to change the way you're thinking so that you can get different results. And so, just like your brain gets wired a certain way, it can get rewired. So you're not necessarily stuck on a certain path. Even when you talk about the power of sin, so to speak, the power of sin comes from you wiring your brain to think that certain way. But like you said, Christoph, before, God has given us the ability to free will. We don't have to stay that way. We can actually make a different choice, and we can change. And it's a blessing, because we could possibly, like, what if we were in a world where once your brain was wired, it was just stuck that way and then you couldn't change it? But we actually have the power through our choices to observe our situations and make a different choice and unwire or rewire our brains in a different way. And so I wanted to kind of point that out, because I think that a lot of people, when it comes to spiritual stuff, it becomes all mystical, and it's like, oh, what are you guys talking about? We're talking about the mind, basically. We're talking about the mind. So you have to be careful what you expose yourself to, what you expose your kids to, what behaviors are you repeating, and understand that you have the power to break those things. And so, yeah.
Can I say something real quick?
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
Two things. I think the two most important things that helped me out was that in my young adulthood, I had a job. I think that was my cocoon. No matter what was happening around me, even though I was confused, I didn't know what direction I wanted to go in. Work helped. It saved my life, because it gave me structure. I had to be at work. I learned a trade. I was there for years. I had shelter. I had security. And in that cocoon, I was able to read and start undoing a lot of the bad ideas I had. But I think it's it's probably the single most important thing a young man can do. You don't know what direction you want to go in. You don't know what you want to do. Get a job and work and figure it out.
Why are you doing that?
Go to work. Go to work.
Yep. Yeah. And so I guess that kind of leads me into like one thing that I wanted to add from you guys. Like, what would you say to, like, somebody watching this, like, especially like a young boy? Well, actually, let me take a step back. So, Christoph, because we haven't really tied your organization into kind of the discussion of what we're talking about. So what are some of the things, because I'm older now, I'm not going to say how old I am, but I'm older now. My brother's older now. Times have changed. What are you seeing when it comes to this type of behavior from the young people today? Like, are you seeing similarities or differences, or what are you noticing?
I hate to bring the word back up again, but it's just the truth.
Mm-hmm.
There's nothing new under the sun. That's what King Solomon said, the wisest man on earth, one of the richest men that ever lived on the face of the planet. He had everything, riches, the women, anything you could think of, it was at his disposal. And he said, there's nothing new under the sun. So I do see these things. And here's what our young people need more than anything. And John actually mentioned this in a roundabout way, is they need structure, discipline, exposure.
Yeah.
Those are the three ingredients for life success for a young person. When you're talking about the mind in its developmental stage, scientifically, it has to have structure, it has to be disciplined, and it needs to be exposed to what you want it to become.
Yeah.
That's key.
Yeah.
We need to expose our young people to what we ultimately want them to become. As long as you do those things, you have created a recipe for life success. And I'm just going to leave with two things. You talk about, you want the practical scientific thing for someone who is a pre-adolescent, adolescent, adult. I don't care if you're 50 years old. Here's the two things that you need to do in order to change your life right now. So write these two things down. Number one is you have to do not let life happen to you. You have to make life happen for you. So how do you do that? Part two is this. You've got to be intentional. The problem with people today is we aren't intentional about anything. We just allow things to happen around us without taking ownership and responsibility for what those things are. The only thing you can't change is what family or where you were born into. Everything else you can change. Like after you're born, life is now when you begin to speak, move, and walk, your life outcome is now your responsibility. We have to stop blaming other people at some point in time for what our life has become.
Yeah.
And we have to take ownership in what we're able to change and do.
Yep.
So if you're intentional about your life, if you hate where you are in your life right now, I don't know who I'm talking to right now, but you don't appreciate, you don't like where you are right down with this moment in your life, all it takes is a decision to make a change and to be different. If you keep doing what you've always done, you'll keep ending up where you already have been.
Exactly.
When you get to a new location, a new destination, you've got to change some things. That goes back to the structure, discipline, exposure. Expose yourself to new people to show you a new way of thinking, a new way of living, a new way of doing. So be intentional and start making life happen for you.
Yeah. Good. I like this. Anyway, John, we're going to wrap up here soon. So did you have anything you wanted to add? Like, what would you tell? Because I know you're really passionate about kind of reaching young people who are kind of going down the path you talked about. You can see a mile away where these guys are going. Like, so if you could talk to those guys right now, those young boys, like, what would you say to them right now?
Number one, get out of that neighborhood. Get completely away from the people. Get out of that neighborhood and work.
Yeah.
Get some discipline. Start getting a routine. Start becoming responsible. Through work, it will teach you a lot. You're gonna be around other men. You're gonna see their lifestyle, what they have, and you got something to measure yourself from, and that'll start get the wheels turning. But get away from the people, get out of that neighborhood.
Yeah. And so I guess for me, what I would like to add, like, okay, I'm gonna like talk from a woman's perspective, especially a mother's perspective, because I see this a lot, especially with so many single parent homes, because most of the time they're women. I see a lot of women not really understand the seriousness of their son having a father or a positive real male role model in his life. That you have a lot of these. I remember some years ago, because I was a single mother for years, and sometimes people just assume that I'm a single mother because I'm Black, even though I'm not. They would say Happy Father's Day to me, and I'm saying, don't say Happy Father's Day to me. I'm not a father. I could never be a father. You cannot replace a father. So no matter how good of a mother you are, you cannot replace a father for your child, and they need, even if their own father is not doing his job, you really need to try to find and pray, because God can lead you to those people. You really need to try to find positive male role models for your son to be around. I think a lot of women don't fully understand this. I didn't fully understand it until my husband talked to me about how important it is for a boy to have a male role model and his father in his life. And so I think a lot of the time this is contributing to the issue, especially if you're in a poor neighborhood, because most of the time, like we talked about, if you're in a single parent home, most of the time you're poor. You're kind of struggling financially, which means you end up in bad neighborhoods. And because you're working and then the father is not there, and then you're in a bad neighborhood, you're letting your son, have his freedom or have his fun, or maybe you're tired and you don't feel like being bothered with your son, and you say, hey, go with your friends or whatever. You have to be more attentive and pay attention to what is going on with your son, because outside of that home, that environment is feeding him. And if his dad is not there, he's going to use that environment and those people to substitute for the absence of his dad. And he can end up going down a bad path, and you don't even realize what's going on. And so I really want to urge women and mothers, especially those of single parent homes. I was a single parent for many years, so I'm not saying that for position like, I don't know, I haven't been in a situation. I'm saying it from experience. you really have to pay attention to your sons. And I know this is also an issue for girls too, so I'm not forgetting about the girls. But a lot of the time, when you get these street gangs become appealing to young boys. And so you really have to pay attention to your son, make sure he's around positive male role models. You can try to put him in sports and programs. I mean, there's a lot of other things to do. And again, I will kind of mention Christoph's program. Find something in your neighborhood that what Christoph is offering for young boys to kind of not only just be around men, but teach them skills and things like that to show them a wider world from what they are around. So I really want to kind of put that from a woman's point of view and a mother's point of view to really, really watch out for your sons, because this is the stage, especially their teenage years. This is when they are most susceptible to this type of lifestyle. So, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So I think we're done, you guys. It's 8:09, and it was a really good conversation. And I'm so glad you guys joined me. Thank you so much. And before we go, Christoph, I know, John, you don't have any organization to kind of tell anybody about anything that you do. If you want to, you can. But Christoph, can you talk a little bit more about your organization, where people can find you, just your contact information, your social media stuff, so that anybody watching this that's interested in what you're doing will know where to look you up?
Absolutely. I just greatly appreciate the opportunity and the privilege to be here with you guys this evening. Mission 3E, you can go to mission3e.com, Mission 3 on Instagram, Facebook. You can find me. I'm the only Christoph Koran in the world. So just type my name in and you'll find me, I'm sure. I'm just so passionate. The organization is so passionate about elevating young people in school life and career by any means necessary. And we work with men, we work with young women, and we challenge them. We give them the structure, discipline, exposure they need to not live a life that I want them to have or what I think that they should live. But really and truly, it's about helping them find themselves, who they truly are, and helping them become the best versions of who that person is. Again, it's exposing them to what they want to become, not what their current surroundings allow them to see every day. So we really help people get a life plan and just do life better. I think we all deserve to live better. And God came and allowed Jesus to come on this earth so that we could have a better opportunity at life. And it's our job as parents, as Christians, as just fellow good people to help the people around us live better. I think if we all do that, that togetherness, we can change this world one young person at a time together.
Yeah.
And when we wake up one day, the future comes quicker than you can realize it. So if you're looking to sow a seed into a young person's life, we are 501c3. You can do that either on our Facebook or on our website, or you can reach out to me. I'd also love to partner with you if you'd like to volunteer in any way. Just feel free to reach out to me at all. You can also hear me on the Conversation Corner podcast. So there's just a multitude of ways to stay connected.
Yeah, great. And I will reach out to you afterwards to get some links, you guys. So if you want to know where to get some of the information that Christoph was talking about, I will post links in the comments under this video. Also, for me, I am a certified life and relationship coach. I do coach from a Christian perspective, and I coach from a variety of topics. So if you're also a mother or anybody else that's interested in anything that we have talked about tonight, I do offer free sessions as well. I do also parenting coaching. I don't advertise it very much, but I have 5 kids, and so I do have some expertise in parenting when it comes to this type of things. So if you guys are interested in Christoph, there will be links under the video, and my link also under the video, and you guys can also schedule a free session right on my Outside the Box Facebook page. John, did you have anything you want to share about anything else before we head out?
Oh, no, I think we covered a lot. On Instagram, what is it again? Mission 3?
Mission 3E.
Okay, got it.
Yeah, I'll put the link under the post. Okay, you guys, thank you so much. Good night, and see you next week.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Yeah.